Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into something that's both shocking and enlightening, a true crime mystery that have actually been solved. Trust me, you won't see some of these twists coming. So, let's get into it. On the morning of January 13th, 1972, Debbie woke up like any other day, unaware that it would be her last. Her mother, Juanita Hooker, was busy with household chores, while her stepfather, Roy Hooker, who preferred to be called Frank, was tinkering around in the garage. The family had recently moved to a new neighborhood, and life seemed to be settling into a new normal. As the day progressed, Juanita realized they had a pile of laundry that needed to be done. She asked Debbie to take care of it, as she often did, given that Debbie was a responsible child for her age. Frank decided to accompany her to the laundromat, as it was getting late in the day. They arrived at the local laundromat, Duds and Suds Co-Opus. Around 6:30 p.m. the laundromat was a community hub, often bustling with neighbors and friends. Frank helped Debbie load the clothes into two washing machines, inserting the coins and adding the detergent. He looked around, saw a few familiar faces, and felt it was safe enough to leave Debbie alone for a bit. Before leaving, Frank reminded Debbie to switch the laundry to the dryers once the washing cycle was complete. He also gave her a few quarters for the vending machine, in case she wanted a soda while she waited. With a pat on her head and a casual "see you soon, kiddo," Frank left the laundromat, heading back home to finish some pending chores. The walk back home was short, just a few blocks, but every step Frank took away from the laundromat would later weigh heavily on him. He arrived home, greeted Juanita, and they both went about their evening tasks, unaware that their lives were about to be shattered forever. At around 7:15 p.m., the washing machines buzzed to signal the end of their cycles. Debbie, who had been sitting on one of the plastic chairs reading a comic book she'd brought with her, got up. She looked at the two washing machines filled with wet clothes and realized she would need help transferring them to the dryers. It was a task she'd done before, but today, the laundry seemed heavier, almost as if it was foreshadowing the weight of the events about to unfold. She decided to head home and ask for help. Debbie put her comic book in her small backpack, zipped it up, and walked out of the laundromat. The sun had already set, and the streetlights were casting their glow on the quiet streets. She took the familiar path, one she had walked countless times, but tonight it felt different, eerily quiet, almost as if the universe was holding its breath. Meanwhile, back at home, the clock struck 7:30 p.m. Juanita looked at Frank. Both felt an unsettling feeling creeping in. Debbie was never late, especially not when it was getting dark outside. The worry lines on Juanita's face deepened, and Frank felt a knot tighten in his stomach. They decided to go to the laundromat themselves. The drive there was agonizingly slow, each red light feeling like a cruel joke. When they finally arrived, they rushed inside, calling out Debbie's name, hoping to hear her voice or see her face pop out from behind a dryer. But the laundromat was empty, save for the hum of a few machines. Their eyes met, and without saying a word, they both knew they had to search the surrounding area. That's when they saw it, the spilled laundry detergent in the parking lot, right next to where they usually parked their car. The cap was off, and the liquid had formed a small puddle. It was as if time stopped for a moment. They looked at each other and knew, deep down, that something was terribly, terribly wrong. As soon as Juanita and Frank realized the gravity of the situation, they immediately called the local police. Within minutes, officers arrived at the laundromat to assess the scene. The spilled laundry detergent, the empty washing machines, and the absence of Debbie were enough to escalate the case. The police chief himself declared it a code atom, a term used for extremely urgent child abduction cases. Realizing the need for immediate action, the local authorities launched a massive search operation, which they named Operation Debbie in honor of the missing girl. The name was not just a label, it was a promise to the community and to Debbie's family that they would do everything in their power to find her. Local news channels broke into their regular programming to broadcast alerts, and the story spread like wildfire. Within hours, the community rallied together in an unprecedented way. Approximately 4,000 volunteers gathered at the local community center, which became the makeshift headquarters for the operation. People from all walks of life, teachers, plumbers, doctors, students, came forward to help. Maps were spread out on tables, and search grids were established. Volunteers were divided into teams, each led by a law enforcement officer. In addition to the manpower, ham radio operators set up a communication network to coordinate the search efforts. Local civil defense forces were mobilized, bringing in search dogs and even helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras. The operation was so extensive that the National Guard was put on standby. Yet, despite the exhaustive efforts, the first 24 hours yielded no results. Debbie was nowhere to be found. The mood at the community center turned somber. Volunteers returned with heavy hearts and muddy boots, their faces etched with the grim realization that they were racing against time. As days turned into weeks, the number of volunteers dwindled, but Operation Debbie continued in various capacities. Flyers were distributed, billboards were erected, and Debbie's face became a haunting reminder of the community's collective failure to protect one of their own. 16 agonizing days had passed since Debbie's disappearance. The community was on edge, and her family was in a state of despair. Despite the relentless efforts of Operation Debbie, there was still no sign of her. That was until a group of high school students made a horrifying discovery that would shake the community to its core. The students were part of a local environmental club and were cleaning up a vacant piece of property as part of a community service project. As they moved through the overgrown grass and weeds, one of the students noticed something unusual, a piece of fabric that seemed out of place in the natural setting. Curious, they moved closer and soon realized they had stumbled upon Debbie's lifeless body. The police were immediately called to the scene. The area was cordoned off, and forensic teams moved in. Debbie had been sexually assaulted and strangled, a grim end to a life cut tragically short. Her body lay partially hidden by the tall grass, as if nature itself was trying to shield her from the world's eyes. Investigators found several pieces of evidence at the crime scene, including strands of hair that didn't belong to Debbie and a piece of cloth that seemed foreign to the area. These clues offered a glimmer of hope that the perpetrator would be caught and brought to justice. However, despite these leads and the advanced forensics of the time, the case went cold. The strands of hair and the piece of cloth were stored in evidence bags, sitting in a storage room, almost as if waiting for technology to advance enough to speak their silent truths. The discovery of Debbie's body was a devastating blow to her family and the community. It also marked the end of Operation Debbie, not with a resolution, but with a haunting question that lingered in everyone's mind. Who did this, and why? Just when it seemed like the case couldn't get any more perplexing, a chilling event occurred that left the community and investigators baffled. A popular Atlanta radio station, known for its talk shows and community engagement, received an anonymous call during a live broadcast. The host, who was discussing local news, was caught off guard when the caller chillingly declared, "I am the one who killed Debbie." The atmosphere in the radio station turned electric. The host, visibly shaken, tried to keep his composure while signaling to the producers to alert the authorities. The caller continued, "You all are looking in the wrong places." Before anything more could be said, the call was abruptly disconnected. Within minutes, the recording of the call was in the hands of the police. Forensic audio experts tried to analyze the voice, looking for any clues that could help identify the caller. Was this a sick prank, or was it the actual murderer taunting the community and the investigators? The police were skeptical. They had received numerous tips and leads over the course of the investigation, many of which led nowhere. But something about this call felt different. It was brazen, almost defiant. Despite this, after analyzing the audio and considering the lack of additional evidence, the authorities ultimately dismissed it as a hoax. This decision left Debbie's family and the community in a state of despair and confusion. The call could have been a significant lead, a break in the case they so desperately needed. Instead, it became another dead end, another what if in a case filled with unanswered questions. The mysterious caller was never identified, and the haunting words became yet another enigma in a case that seemed to be full of them. Years turned into decades, and the case of Debbie Randall seemed destined to remain an unsolved mystery. Her family, though never giving up hope, had come to terms with the painful reality that they might never find out who took Debbie away from them. The community, too, had moved on, but the story of Debbie was passed down as a cautionary tale, a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that lurks in unexpected places. But then, something extraordinary happened. Advances in DNA technology had reached a point where even the most minute samples could yield significant information. Law enforcement agencies across the country were revisiting cold cases, armed with this new forensic tool. And so, Debbie's case was reopened. The strands of hair and the piece of cloth that had been found at the crime scene, evidence that had sat in storage for decades, were re-examined. This time, the results were different. The DNA analysis led to a match, a name, and a face. The face of a man who had been living his life, perhaps even forgetting the atrocity he had committed all those years ago. The arrest was swift and publicized. Cameras flashed as handcuffs were placed on the wrists of a man who thought he had evaded justice. The news sent shockwaves through the community, reopening old wounds but also bringing a sense of long-awaited justice. For Debbie's family, it was a bittersweet moment. Nothing could bring Debbie back, but knowing that her killer would not walk free provided a sense of closure they had longed for. It was as if the universe had finally answered their prayers, albeit decades later. The breakthrough in Debbie's case serves as a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice and the incredible advancements in science that made it possible. It's a story of hope, a story that tells us it's never too late for justice to be served. The case of Deborah Lynn Randall serves as a grim reminder of the vulnerabilities that exist in our society, but also the power of science and relentless investigation in solving crimes that once seemed unsolvable.